Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super Max, 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 super Max, Max. Ik mis geen race, heb scheid aan mijn centen. Ik zie Max zijn mooiste momenten. Hij is de king van Barcelona. Rijdt alles zoek van Spa tot Monza. De geur van rubber en smeltend asfalt. Ik juich als Max weer één voorbij knalt. Zijn inhaalacties zijn bijzonder. Het is een baas, een wereldwonder. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1.
Bizar! Fucking bizar! Jaren zit je naar dingen te kijken en te hopen. En daar is hij. Max Verstappen in de laatste bocht in Barcelona. Yo hey! Yo ho!
Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super 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 Max, 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 super Max, Max. Jarenlang zit je te kijken en te hopen op succes. Zodra je Max ziet racen op de baan, dan denk je yes. Hij is niet te passeren, niemand krijgt het cadeau. Hij is een pure racer, vangt ze op en roept no.
Hij is de nieuwe baas.
Hij is de nieuwe baas.
Max is de nieuwe baas.
Hij is de nieuwe baas.
Ja, wij gaan helemaal los.
Hij is de nieuwe bos. Super Max, ik ben apetrots. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1.
Yo fucking hell, wat bizar! Ongelooflijk! Sportoverwinningen zijn zo mooi. En deze is de allermooiste die ik in mijn leven gezien heb. Jongen, jongen, jongen.
Max, 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 super Max, Max, super, super 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 Max, 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 super Max, Max.
Yo fucking hell, wat bizar!
Hello folks and welcome to the final F1TV Tech Talk of 2021 here from Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. Both World Championships are on the line and will be decided this weekend. But first, here's what's coming up in this week's show. With 2022 looming, Sam Collins bids farewell to car parts great and small. Craig Scarborough digs deep into one of those soon-to-be extinct elements, the barge board. And we'll be joined by motorsport legend and F1's managing director, Ross Brawn, to pick over a season to remember. Now, while the attention of the world seems to be, of course, on the Drivers' World Championship to be concluded this weekend, there is the not-so-small matter of the Constructors' Championship to be determined as well. Mercedes versus Red Bull. And earlier this week, Lawrence Barretto caught up with Mercedes technology director Mike Elliott to look back not just over this season, but Mercedes' run of incredible championship form through this turbo hybrid era.
So Mike, the W12 is the last in the current line of Mercedes F1 designs with a completely new rulebook coming in next year. So I wondered if you could talk us through, and this might take you some time, the evolution of the car concept from 2014 through to now.
I think when you talk about the evolution of the cars, I think the reality for us as engineers is they sort of blend into one over time, and you kind of really look more at the rule changes. So I think if you sort of go back to that period of time in 2014, we had that huge advantage on the power unit in that first year, and it was about really making sure that we took all the lessons, all the learnings we could from 2014, and we just improved both on the chassis and on the power unit. And I think we sort of carried that through 2015, 2016, having obviously very good seasons. 2017, we had a pretty big rule change. That's when we went to the wider cars, wider front wings, bigger diffusers, rear wing was lowered. And that was a massive change. And we went through winter testing thinking we weren't quite in the right position. And at the end of winter testing, we actually discovered we had a bent setup beam. And so we cross-weighted the cars all the way through that second test. And we only worked it out when the drivers said to us that they could feel a difference in the left and the right-handers. And when we went back through with all the time that you've then got to go through the data, we could clearly see an issue. We turned up in Melbourne with everybody thinking maybe we weren't quite on the pace, with us thinking, well, if that's the answer and we can solve that quite easily, then we'd be better. And obviously, as everybody saw from 2017, we had a pretty good car all the way through that season. I guess the next car probably that's really interesting is the 2019 one, in that at times we sort of struggled with that. I think we had a resurgent Ferrari to deal with, who were very quick, and they pushed us through the vast majority of the season. And then 2020, we again got back to having what felt like a decent advantage. And then you look into this year, and it's the tightest fight we've seen in Formula One for a long time. And I think that is a consequence of the fact that the rules are sort of aging, and therefore the cars are converging to some extent. And also some of the changes that happened over the winter probably hurt us more than they hurt other people.
The next topic is low rake, high rake. That's one of the biggest differences between Mercedes and Red Bull. Can you discuss sort of the relative merits of both of them?
It's just a philosophy about where you develop your car. I think if you were to look at the Red Bull, my guess is that they have a characteristic in aerodynamics where if you look at the very high ride heights, the drop-off's less than it is for us. And I think that's a sort of a direction they've deliberately chosen, would be my guess. For us, we've just found we've chased where we think is the most performance. And while we've had a look at higher ride heights, we just haven't sort of seen the sort of drive to go in that direction. As a consequence, we've just stayed where we are. And I think if you were to ask Red Bull the same question, if there was one of their senior people sat by the side of me, they'd probably be saying the same thing, that they've got their philosophy and they've struggled to see why we've gone our way. And it's just so small differences. And I think what's amazing is if you sort of look at the two cars, they have very different philosophies, but performance-wise, they're pretty close. So there can't be a huge amount in it.
I wanted to delve a little bit more into the differences between the W11 and the W12, and wondered if you'd be able to explain where you spent your tokens and why.
I think in the end we didn't spend our tokens. We had a plan that potentially we'd spend them on the nose, and elected not to in the end. I think the reality was obviously we were in a period of COVID. We were looking at this regulations for next year, which are huge. There are a massive change aerodynamically. And so going into this year, it was all about how do we balance the development we do for this year's car versus the development we do for next year's. At the time we were making those decisions, we also had quite an advantage. If you go back to 2020, we had a very good car, and it was more a case of saying, where are the sort of weaknesses? What are the things that we could go and develop and move on a bit? And they're not big things. They're small things that we'll have seen in the aerodynamic concept. There'll be things we've seen in the flow field we wanted to attack and change. And so I think if you look at the two cars, the details are all in, the differences, are all in details.
Now, one question I wanted to ask was about DAS. So losing that for this year, how much of an effect did that have?
I mean, clearly it has an effect, otherwise we wouldn't have been running it on the car. But I think it's inevitable with things like DAS that they stand out because they're fundamentally something very different. And we developed that system knowing it would allow us to alter the balance through the corners, knowing it would help us with certain aspects of the tyres and things we wanted to do with the tyres. And if we'd have had it available for this year, we'd have definitely been running it. But I think when you look at the differences between the cars and performance, that's a device that's maybe worth a tenth or two at the most. It's not something that's massive, and it's not something that's consistent circuit to circuit. Some circuits it has no benefit, and others it's a small gain. So I think for us as engineers, the real difference between the cars is all in details, and that's where the performance is coming from.
Well, you were talking earlier about the floor with the aerodynamic regulations. They came in at quite short notice for this year. Yeah. How much of an impact was that? And was it a greater impact or a lesser impact than you had anticipated?
Well, the impact was large for us. In terms of was it as we predicted? I think the reality is you don't really try and predict. You put it on the model in the tunnel, you test it in CFD, and you see where you are and you try and work around it. And what you're trying to do is to sort of look at the changes it makes to the flow field and say, can I recover those same features, those same positive features I had before that change? I think the interesting question is in terms of the effect it had relative to different teams. I think if I go back to that period of time and look at it in hindsight, I suspect we were more impacted than other teams, and we certainly didn't realise that at the time. I think when we first saw the impact, it came predominantly at the sort of the ride heights we were running the car. But that's where you'd expect to take the hit. You take the hit where you've got the biggest performance. And I think as we developed the car, we've started finding there were gains to be had at higher ride heights. In fact, our car this year runs slightly higher ride heights than it did in the previous year as a result of that. But ultimately, the rules are just a game. That's something we have to challenge, we have to attack and deal with. And that's how we approach it.
Now, going back to testing, the car seemed like it was tricky to drive, seemed to have an imbalance. When you've seen that, and going back to what you just said before about the expectations of the challenge it was, how did you go about fixing that in time for the start of the season?
I think it's always really difficult to sort of separate the balance and handling, drivability of the car from the underlying performance. If you've got a quick car, it always handles nicely. It's just one of those things because those fine details no longer matter. So I don't think that this year's car was particularly any worse than ones we've seen previously in terms of handling. I think it's always difficult trying to get the tyres exactly where you want them, exactly in the window, balance front and rear, and working in harmony with the rest of the car, both the chassis and the power unit. And I think at the beginning of the season, we did have some handling issues, but it was probably about our understanding about how you get that sort of last little bit of performance, that last little bit of balance out of the car. And it wasn't so much hardware changes, it was more learning. And I'd say in general, this game is all about learning and understanding. If you know more than the opposition does in terms of the way you develop your car, the way you set up your car, you're always going to be in a better position. So I think if you sort of look through this season, I think we've made a lot of progress in terms of understanding how we want to get the most out of the tyres and out of the car itself.
And I think we also did a pretty good job with the upgrades we brought, particularly the Silverstone package. I think took us a good step forward in terms of the car's overall performance, but also its handling.
You're always striving for perfection, but is there one area of the car that you'd like to change?
I've never known a car where when we get to the end of the year and we sit down, we go, that's perfect, because it doesn't exist. The reality is we can always make it better. You know, I think if you look at the position we are in the championship, we didn't start off with a good enough car in comparison to previous years. You know, and we've had various issues through the year in terms of getting the most out of the drivability. The power unit, for instance, has been documented, and the degradation has been another thing. But on our side, I think on the chassis side, you'd look at that and say that we've also struggled to develop the car as much as we've liked. But what I think has been really good is that, as I said, is the team sticking together and finding all of the small gains that were available to find, bolting them on the car. You know, I think the drivers have done a brilliant job this year. You know, been huge pressure to deal with, and the championship has sort of swung one way then the next and back again. And you know, I guess that's what the fans want to see. And you know, and while I'd love to be in a position where we're 4/10 up the road and it's all easy, that's just not the championship we've had.
I'm joined now by Albert Fabrega.
I will.
One final time.
Yeah, really exciting.
What a fascinating interview.
Yeah, amazing.
Where do we start? I've actually got notes on my phone because there's so much to talk about.
Many interesting things in there.
Let's begin. The token spend.
Yeah.
Or the lack of a token spend. I found it really interesting what he was talking about there, because when we were at testing, there were rumours that Mercedes might have failed a crash test on their notes. James Allison said that token spend would be extremely obvious when it was on the car.
Yep.
There has been no obvious token spend. They haven't admitted what, if anything, it was. Do we think the part they didn't put on might potentially have been that nose?
It is a speculation, but it was clear from what Elliot said about it. So the only thing that can stop you to put a nose on the track, on the car, and test it properly is to fail the crash test. So now we have an answer that we have been speculating at the beginning of the season. We're saying maybe the gearbox was another token spend, but we finally see that Mercedes has done this championship without spending any single token.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Amazing.
Absolutely incredible. He also said that the car imbalance in testing was addressed not through hardware changes, but through learning. Does that show kind of the methodical approach, I guess, that the team has had to take through this year?
Yeah, I think that the new regulations on the floor cut has affected more Mercedes than others. The low car rate has been affected for these regulations in a major manner in a bigger manner than the Red Bull or other cars with a higher rake like the McLaren. So I think that they were a little bit surprised, to be honest. And they spent, I would say, the first half of the season trying to understand and trying to get the most of the car, trying to put the tires on the right window. That was not easy.
Is that a surprise to you, that even a team like Mercedes, with all their resource, all their knowledge, all their championship success, could have been caught out by the regulations like that, and that it took so long to get on top of it?
Yeah, it's surprising, because even this season, with the new regulations ahead of the end of the beginning of the new season, where most of the team is working already on of this new pack of regulations, how capable have been them to retake the situation? Because it was a moment when we started in Bahrain that it was almost lost.
Yeah,
they couldn't take the most of the car, and there was a lot of doubts on everything that they were doing. Maybe some of the parts that they developed was according to that new nose that never arrived. So they have to retake the situation, to rebuild themselves, to recharge energies themselves, because after such a lot of 6 or 7 wins in a row on the World Championship, it's very difficult to find motivation on the team.
Also, fascinating that he discussed technology such as DAS, which they knew was only going to be used for a year, was only worth, I say only worth, 1/10 of a second, but you know, some teams would kill for 1/10 of the second out there. Fascinating, and an insight, I think, into Mercedes and how they operate. The amount of time, effort, research, development you put into a piece that you know full well is going into the skip at the end of the year, I guess because of everything that it teaches you that you can put into practice in the future.
Yeah, that's true, because they learn a lot of things with the DAS. It's not only that 10s that maybe they will win in not in all the races, but in some places, in some circuits, is the capability they have to explore different scenarios, moving the toe, depending on the circuits, depending on how to hit the tires. It helped a lot to hit the tires, so they understand a lot what was going on the car in every single circuit, in every single condition, track temperatures, different compounds, and all that information. When you move it to 2021, where the car was not much different because they keep a lot of pieces moving, carry on from one season to the other. They help it out, and that problem they had at the beginning of the season, all the information they had from the DAS and the 2020, it helped a lot for sure.
I love the attitude of the rules are just a game. That's what designers are all about.
Yes.
And when we looked at was 2022, quite restrictive, quite limited set of regulations, but they're finding those loopholes, they're finding those chances to put their own spin on it. That's the game, isn't it? That's what they love.
It is a game. It is a challenge for the engineers that I'm sure on all this process of discovering the new regulations, starting the CFD, going to the wind tunnel, starting the production, everyone is winning that championship. Everyone is winning that game. Yeah. But at the end of the day, when we go to Barcelona for the first test in February, there's only one winner, and the other, there will be losers, and trying to recover the situation. Now, it's a game. It's challenging, it's fun, till you go to the first race, or till the first qualifying.
Well, as we look towards 2022, Albert, and those new cars, we will, of course, be getting rid of the current iteration of Formula One car. Who better than to look back over the joy these cars have given us and what we will be leaving behind at the end of this season than our Sam Collins.
Looking over these beautiful machines for what might be the very final time, because a rule change is coming, it makes me a little bit sad in some ways that we're no longer going to see this generation of Formula One cars, because that era has come to an end. And with it, we've lost quite a lot of things that, for me, for a very long time, have really excited and entertained me. Some beautiful pieces of engineering. And it makes me think back to when this era of Formula One first began, back in 2009, when Formula One and the FIA decided that the cars had become too complex aerodynamically. They were too adorned with winglets and pieces that stuck up, and they wanted to simplify the bodywork. They simplified the aerodynamic regulations and tried to improve overtaking. The jury's out on whether that really worked. It certainly produced some interesting seasons and some interesting designs. And that first year, 2009, we saw the wings get smaller at the rear and wider at the front. And I don't think they were particularly pretty cars, but they did produce some particularly exciting results and unexpected results. But as the seasons went on, things changed quite a lot, and the rules started to evolve. 2010, and things really started to change. The FIA had banned refueling, and that made the cars much longer to accommodate the much larger fuel tanks, and that's something that's still with us to this day. But those long cars were also aided by something at the back end that was banned at the end of the season, double diffusers, something that the Honda team, then, which became Braun, and a few others like Toyota, utilised to generate downforce at the rear of the car. But with those systems gone for 2011, a number of teams came up with an alternate solution, one that I find was extremely clever, albeit a little bit wasteful on fuel in some of the sessions under the rules at the time. And that was blown diffusers. Red Bull were the first really big exponents of it, but they weren't alone in it. And those devices used exhaust gases to seal off the edge of the diffuser from the turbulent gas off the base of the rear tyre. And the teams that were using got a huge advantage in downforce. Now, the FIA didn't particularly like that, but it stayed with the sport in various configurations and versions right up until 2014, when those blown diffusers were effectively banned by moving the exhaust tailpipe to the centre of the car. And also the turbocharger robbed the cars of a mass flow rate that they needed to generate that barrier between the sides of the car. But the teams hadn't forgotten how to do it, and we'll come back to that in a little while. In 2017, there was quite significant change. New wider tyres were introduced, and a new set of aerodynamic regulations came along, which gave the cars a lot more aerodynamic freedom. In areas where the teams couldn't really put bodywork in the past, they're now able to. And there were actually some completely free volumes of development introduced on the car. The barge boards, for example, became a real area of focus. With no real restriction that other than height and width, the team could do anything within a box. And they became hugely complex, developed at every single Grand Prix. And in 2021, we see really their ultimate form, and in every sense of the word. But that's not all that has been restricted. There were changes at the front end of the car too. The wings changed significantly. They were lower and they were wider, and they became much better looking at the rear of the car. And at the front end, the front wings had got quite complicated. They were simplified, and the noses, still raised, were lowered ever so slightly. And perhaps some of the less attractive noses of earlier, with the exposed front impact structures, had gone away, and that was probably for the best. But the noses, as we see now, will be going away for 2022, and a whole new development area will be being opened up. And that's not the only area of the car that will be free to be opened up in future. And that's why even saying farewell to these cars, which in their 2020 guise and at some circuits in 2021 are the fastest Formula One cars in history. While I'm a little bit sad about losing some of those technological aspects, I'm even more excited about 2022. Gone will be the barge boards, the front wing end plates, the rear wing end plates as we know them, the high noses, they're gone too, and they've been in the sport since the early 1990s and the Tyrrell team. The rear wings are going to look completely different. The barge boards are going to be gone and far simplified. And those floors I talked about earlier on, that engineering, that development that the teams had picked up on and they'd learned from the blown diffuser days, at last the FIA have finally found a way, they think, to not worry about that anymore. The teams will no longer be using airflow or exhaust gas to seal the sides of the floor and seal the diffuser from that turbulent gas off the rear tyre. Because 2022, the cars will have tunnel floors. Ground effect will be back. And that opens up a whole new chapter in the history of technological development in Formula One. And that chapter is going to be just as exciting, if not more exciting, than it was in this long era of Formula One. So while I'm sad to see these cars go, I'm not sad at all. In fact, I'm super excited. Formula One in 2022 is going to be one of the most exciting eras in the history of this sport. And I, for one, can't wait.
Now to look back over the season, I'm delighted to say Ross Brawn has joined us. Ross, thank you so much for being
with no real restriction that other than height and width, the team could do anything within a box. And they became hugely complex, developed at every single Grand Prix. And in 2021, we see really their ultimate form, and in every sense of the word. But that's not all that has been restricted. There were changes at the front end of the car too. The wings changed significantly. They were lower and they were wider, and they became much better looking at the rear of the car. And at the front end, the front wings had got quite complicated. They were simplified, and the noses, still raised, were lowered ever so slightly. And perhaps some of the less attractive noses of earlier, with the exposed front impact structures, had gone away, and that was probably for the best. But the noses, as we see now, will be going away for 2022, and a whole new development area will be being opened up. And that's not the only area of the car that will be free to be opened up in future. And that's why even saying farewell to these cars, which in their 2020 guise and at some circuits in 2021 are the fastest Formula One cars in history. While I'm a little bit sad about losing some of those technological aspects, I'm even more excited about 2022. Gone will be the barge boards, the front wing end plates, the rear wing end plates as we know them, the high noses, they're gone too, and they've been in the sport since the early 1990s and the Tyrrell team. The rear wings are going to look completely different. The barge boards are going to be gone and far simplified. And those floors I talked about earlier on, that engineering, that development that the teams had picked up on and they'd learned from the blown diffuser days, at last the FIA have finally found a way, they think, to not worry about that anymore. The teams will no longer be using airflow or exhaust gas to seal the sides of the floor and seal the diffuser from that.
Medium tyre seems like a very good starting race tyre. We'll talk about the start a lot, I'm sure, in the next hour, because it's really about qualifying simulations, isn't it? Karun Chandok and Jenson Button. And yesterday, when it came to the low fuel runs, Mercedes looked like they had the edge.
They did. They looked very competitive, especially Lewis in the Mercedes. But yeah, it's a funny one in FP3, isn't it? Because you know, you've done your tweaks from FP2, hoping that they're going to be positive for your low fuel runs, but the temperature is 10 degrees hotter. So you come out of FP3 thinking, was it better or was it not? I don't know. So normally going into qualifying from FP3, you would have a car that's slightly on the nose, a little bit oversteery, because when the circuit cools down, you'll pick up rear grip and the balance should be good.
So what do they do then for this session? Is it right, the setup changes that we've made overnight? Do we just leave them on and hope that they're the right changes, or can you learn much in the next 50 minutes, 60 minutes?
I think, as Jensen said right there, you have to be careful not to follow the track in terms of, you know, just because it's hotter, the balance does change. So you've got to be careful not to overreact to the track temperature and the balance you've got in this session. I think I'm interested to see how Red Bull get on, because they had a whole load of understeer in the car yesterday when we watched FP2. I mean, Max was having to take wider lines at some of the corners just because the front end wouldn't bite. So they would have done a reasonable amount of work, I think, overnight to try and get a better balance in the car. But for them to be able to validate that today is going to be very tricky.
Certainly on the high fuel runs yesterday, Red Bull on the soft tyres looked like they had a significant advantage, almost a second a lap over Mercedes. That was on the medium tyre, the soft tyre just slightly less. But Max Verstappen didn't get as many laps in on the medium tyre as he would have wanted because of that crash I mentioned that Kimi Raikkonen produced about 5 minutes from the end of the session. If you're just joining us, there's the Drivers' Championship. Level pegging going into the final round. Mercedes can be Constructors' Champions for a record-breaking 8th time as well this weekend if they score 17 points in the race. Red Bull can do nothing to stop them. Red Bull going for their first Constructors' Championship since 2013. And there are the yachts in the Marina, where the parties were going on very late into the night last night, Ted. In fact, I'm told that about 6 o'clock in the morning the parties stopped around the Marina, so any drivers staying in that big hotel wouldn't have got much sleep last night, and I'm sure Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen would have been struggling for some Zeds wherever they were sleeping.
Hello, Crofty. You sound like you got a good night's sleep at least.
Well,
Earplugs.
I did, yes.
Earplugs, always the way if you're in a noisy hotel. But yes, welcome to the pit lane. There is a bit of tension down here. And, you know, I like to come up with meal-based analogies for Formula One events. And so I feel like, as is the favorite cuisine around here in a Lebanese restaurant, we've had our hummus, we've had our tabbouleh, we've even had our baba ganoush. And it's now time to see whether the chicken shish is perfectly done or slightly undercooked, or whether the lamb kebabs, maybe the lamb chops, are done to perfection. And will there be any difference in any of the cars? And already I've spotted a difference. Check out Sergio Perez's rear wing there. Can you see quite a sort of straight across main plane, Crofty?
Yes.
And everybody in the commentary box. Let's move to Max Verstappen, and it's the lower downforce wing on Max Verstappen's car. Can you see with the spoon section in the middle of Max Verstappen's rear wing?
Big difference.
Section. There is a big difference. So already Red Bull Racing thinking about how the second driver is going to play it, thinking about how Sergio Perez might be brought in. Of course, qualifying hasn't really been Checo Perez's strong point recently, so they need to change that. And maybe by giving him the high downforce wing there, they can get Checo Perez into contention in qualifying. But really, Crofty, if you're going to liken this also, not past the Lebanese food comparison, to maybe a movie scene, you might ask that chap in the sand-coloured shirt, Gerard Butler there. But Red Bull thinking this might be, he's just got his back to us while he's entertaining his friends. Red Bull might be thinking they need him to be a bit more like 300 and a bit less in that film where he's looking after the dog.
Gerard Butler, Simon Lazenby's favourite Hollywood actor, Ted Kravitz, with meal analogies. He didn't mention dessert. I think he had waffle last night, didn't he?
I mean, that was just spectacular. I was just sat here in amazement. That was beautiful, Ted.
The pronunciation of baba ganoush was excellent.
Yeah, it's
absolutely excellent.
It is a great name for a dish, isn't it?
It is, and it was very tasty as well, as
yes,
we had dinner last night. Yeah. Anyway, on to more relevant topics.
On to the current main course, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a long season. We've been away from home for quite a while. We'll be eating sandwiches next week, so we'll be cooking for ourselves. Hamilton and Verstappen then, Drivers' Championship. First, Max Verstappen. Second, Lewis Hamilton, because Max has got more wins than Lewis this year, 9 to 8. He's got 17 podiums to Lewis's 16. One more podium for Max Verstappen would break the record for the most podiums set by a driver in a single season. Currently, Sebastian Vettel, Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton on 4 occasions, tied with Max Verstappen with 17 podiums for the year. Plenty of top 10 finishes as well. And for Max Verstappen, when he has finished, well, if he hasn't been damaged by a collision or forced out of the race by a collision, it's been a first or a second. He hasn't even finished third in those podiums.
He's had an outstanding season. I mean, you know, the reality is, okay, Red Bull started the season with a quicker car.
I need my dash brighter, I can't see anything.
They might have left the settings on from last night when it would have been lower, because it would have been under the lights, too bright for the normal settings.
Exactly, but yeah, no, back to Max. He has been outstanding this season. I was thinking back, off here, if you think of the error in qualifying in Saudi, you know, forget all the discussion around wheel-to-wheel battles, right? But actually, in terms of pure driver error, that's the only one I can think of, you know, for a driver who's been, he's been fighting at the age of 23, then turned 24 for his first World Championship with a great deal of pressure against, statistically, the greatest driver of all time. He has performed at an exceedingly high level this season.
I caught a few moments with him, Jensen, on Thursday, and I said, well, look, are you prepared for the intensity of this battle going into the final race, given that, of course, you've never won a single-seater World Championship before, and I'm not being disrespectful, but everything you do in your junior career prepares you for moments like this. And he said, well, yeah, okay, I had the battle, you know, with Esteban Ocon, didn't I, in F3? But don't forget, I've won championships in karting, and a lot of championships in karting, and this is just the same. There's a throttle pedal, there's a brake pedal, and okay, there's gears on these cars and not karts, but it's the same concept, and I like that way of thinking.
No, definitely it is the same, but I'm not sure he's going to be looking back to his karting career to compare it with Formula One. I mean, he knows what he's doing, and he knows what he has to do. He has to score more points than everyone else. That's the aim of the game in Formula One. It's very simple.
Well, that's the same as karting.
Exactly, it is, but karting, yeah, they have more one-off races. Well, World Champs was a one-off when I was racing anyway, but yeah, it's a long season, and it still amazes me that they've both ended up on the same points. I know I keep going on about it, but it's insane. After 20 races, they are on the same points going into this last showdown.
I mean, if you look at the history of, say, English top-flight football, even before the Premier League came along, 122 years of top-flight football, I think it only went down to 2 occasions where 2 teams played each other on the final day, the winner of whom would go on to win the championship. The last one being in 1989, I think it was, when, 1989, where Arsenal went to Liverpool and they needed to win 2-0, and in the 91st minute got their second goal. Brilliant bit of commentary from Brian Moore. Thomas, it's all up for grabs now, as he went into the box. I can see a moment like that right at the end of this race on Sunday, where it's all up for grabs now.
You can't wait, can you?
I can't. I'm so excited.
Are you going to use that line?
I might, actually, yeah. in deference to the great Brian Moore, yes.
I just keep thinking about it, you know, going back to Saudi and the standing starts after the red flags. If we had that, if we had a standing start red flag situation with 5 laps to go, with those 2 on the front row, it would just be amazing, wouldn't it? It would absolutely be amazing.
Yeah, in the year that they introduced the concept of sprint races. Well, let's have a sprint race to decide it. Congratulations, Lance Stroll, by the way. 100th Grand Prix this weekend, becomes the 2nd Canadian after Jacques Villeneuve to reach 100 Grand Prix, becomes the 75th driver to reach 100 Grand Prix as well, which, when you consider the amount of drivers in the Formula One World Championship, I thought there might be a few more. You're in that exclusive club as well, of course.
Yeah, that's not many, is it?
No.
75. Considering we've had 30, is it 33 world champions?
Absolutely. Wow. Which you're in that exclusive club as well.
That is a really big book you've got, Crofty.
See, this is my, I'm going to double check Jensen Button's stats here. This is my Grand Prix guide.
Okay.
Which I have with me at all times.
See, everyone at home just thinks you're just full of stats and you just know everything. But no, you have a book.
I know where to find it. See, look, 2009, look, you're in there. Jay Button, GB.
So how many world champions have there been?
There are 33.
33?
Yeah. Car number 33 could become number 34, or car number 44 could become the 8th champion for the 8th time.
So 75 people doing 100 Grand Prix is actually more surprising, only 75.
Yeah, considering how many drivers. How many short were you, Karim?
Oh, plenty.
Not your fault, sir. Not your fault at all. Esteban Ocon, he's part of an exclusive club that are making their 89th start in Formula One, but he is, of course, a Grand Prix winner and has won this season. His teammate Fernando Alonso has been on the podium. Alpine's highlights of the year so far. Let's go back down to the man with the knife and fork in the pit lane, Ted Kravitz.
Well, Crofty, we've gauged the mood at Red Bull Racing. Christian Horner gave me a friendly kick up the derriere as he was making his way from the pit garage up onto his pit wall perch. Very gentle he was. Very gentle little kick up the derriere, yes. I deserve it, let's face it. And let me tell you what's going on in the Mercedes garage. It's actually, well, not blessed with celebrities like Gerard Butler, but the boss has turned up, Ola Kalenius, the boss of the whole Mercedes-Benz company. And before the session, a late change or a late panic on the brakes, which was interesting, on Lewis Hamilton's car. His number one mechanic, Nathan, was sort of rushing around like a very busy thing, trying to get the job done. It didn't look like they'd tried it out and there'd been a problem. Maybe there was a late call from the engineers that they wanted a different setting, or maybe they did find a leak, actually. In any case, let's keep an eye on it. I will keep an eye on it for you. They did finish it with about 3 minutes to go to the start of the session, and I think everything's fine now. But Hamilton's had some issues with the brakes in the last couple of races, hasn't he? Locking up here and there, but seems to be okay now. But they need everything to be on point, don't they? Absolutely everything.
And then we can see those shots from earlier in the Mercedes garage. Overnight, they've also replaced the exhaust system on that Mercedes car. They put a new one in. That's the 5th exhaust system of the year. You're allowed 8, so no dramas there. Right, we're on board with Max Verstappen, who's got the fastest time of the session so far, 124.9, and he is hurtling towards the heavy braking zone of the chicane.
Yeah, interestingly, Max did a double cool lap, so he's done 2 slow laps after his first 24.9, that is the benchmark so far. So I'm not surprised, you know, for the reason I was saying before the start of the session, I'm not surprised to see Max and Red Bull out on track, despite these unrepresentative track temperatures, because the car didn't look underneath him yesterday. The Mercedes did look like a better balanced car, and clearly they want to get some mileage just under their belt and see if they have been able to improve it overnight.
Also running, as Ted pointed out, different configurations of that rear wing. Is there a chance they'll do a back-to-back with those rear wings in this session?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the aim. They're going to get as much information as they can, but it's very strange for a driver I always hated changing wing going into qualifying. So putting more downforce going on into qualifying was always a strange one for me, or taking downforce off. You know, the preparation of FP3 for me got me set for qualifying. So we'll see what happens. Checo's not actually been out to do a lap yet.
He hasn't, no.
Which is a surprise, because you'd think they'd want to get that information as soon as possible.
Jensen, do you think that Red Bull have looked at it and said, in the last 3 races, we got beaten on a Sunday because Mercedes had superior straight line speed, and we've just got to commit to this lower downforce wing and then see how we can balance the car up around it, you know, thinking of straight line speed for tomorrow, and then just find some sort of happy balance around that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky thing, isn't it? They do have an advantage, Mercedes, whether it's power or efficiency on the straight. But Red Bull's always had less rear wing, though, than the Mercedes. They've always had to run a little bit less wherever they've gone. But it does seem a bigger amount here in Abu Dhabi.
Yesterday, Max Verstappen was quickest in the speed trap, 204.2 miles an hour. Decent achievement, that as well, because he was running. Did he get a tow?
I was led to believe by one of the engineers in the paddock that lap in particular was a slipstream.
Fair enough then. But he was running engine number 1 yesterday, the engine that was first put in Bahrain, which has done, so I'm led to believe, 30% more in terms of mileage than Honda were ever expecting. So in what is Honda's last race in Formula 1, fair play Honda for that. That is a magnificent achievement.
They put a tweet out on their page today showing the first ever test they did with McLaren, which I don't think you drove the car. Was it Stoffel, I think?
I don't think anyone drove the car,
well,
really.
This was it. They did 5 laps across 4 days, or 7 laps across 4 days or something, and it just couldn't get going. And to be fair, you know, Honda put that out. It just shows how much progress they've made.
Well, I remember the first race with the engine back in 2016. I was 2 laps down by the end of the race.
Yeah.
Nothing went wrong. We had to also lift off the throttle pedal about 250 meters before each corner because of we weren't recharging enough, so we were using so much fuel.
And vibrations, I was told as well, it was shaking the chassis just a little bit. Hamilton's come out, by the way, on the soft compound tyres. Max has been running the mediums in this part of the session. Soft tyres for Lewis Hamilton. These times are not necessarily representative, so I don't think we're not paying any attention. We are, but it will become more representative a little bit later on, and we are at least 10 degrees warmer in terms of track temperature than we will be for qualifying.
The tyre choice, again, I think underlines for me that Red Bull are thinking of the race. They're thinking about how do we get a happy balance with a low downforce wing on the medium tyre, which is where they're probably going to start the race on.
Yeah.
Whereas Mercedes are doing a more normal FP3 program, which is let's focus on qualifying.
Talking of tyres, by the way, and I think the two might be related. Pirelli said last night they were a bit concerned about some of the curves here and being a bit too aggressive, and they didn't want a situation as we had in Qatar, where the failures that we saw in Qatar were caused by excessive running over aggressive curbs. Some of the curbs have been ground down a little bit. Pirelli have put the PSI up overnight, so the front tyres were running 21.5. It's now 23, and the rears were running 20. It's now 21.
That's a big amount.
21 is a lot on the rear, isn't it?
That's 23 is a lot on the front.
Yeah, it is. They're going to, overheating is going to be a big issue.
You think?
Definitely with that. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's no sun tonight. It's going to be 10 degrees cooler track temp, but still not going to be easy. They're going to be doing super slow out laps, I think.
That Mercedes looks hooked up, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it looks. Lewis is not. He's nowhere close to the limit. And it doesn't look like he's having to fight the car, yet the lap time's coming.
He's actually over at the limit there. Anyway, Kareem.
Was he?
Track limits.
He went over the white line.
Track limits being monitored, by the way, at turns 7, which is the second part of the chicane. Turn 15, which is the fast right-hander by the boats.
So track still 4/10 slower compared to FP2. Some will be temperature, some will be wind.
Turn 16, which is the final corner, and it's all leaving the track and the white lines. And I get the last corner in particular. We could see that decide places in qualifying today if they go just a fraction over that white line.
So they're not checking it at turn 5, where they showed.
No,
Lewis
so it was okay.
So it was
You're
okay.
right. He was inside the track, but he wasn't. Yeah, he won't get penalised for it. That's the main thing.
It's just that sort of stuff just drives me mad, doesn't it? Like, why don't you check it at turn 5 anyway?
Because they haven't got enough cameras down there.
Exactly. They can't police it, I guess. But the last corner, the tricky thing is the last corner. You're coming in big speed at the apex. Very difficult to see the curve of the exit. It's flat. I know it's coloured, but you're going at such a high speed. It is very difficult to judge the exit, and you want to use obviously as much track as possible. So.
And the tyres are completely overheating at that point, aren't they?
Yeah. So it's difficult to be precise.
That's the view from the Hot Laps garage, where you can come and have your sparkly stuff, speak to Jean Alesi, and watch from the end of the pit lane, which is not a bad place to watch all the action from. I would imagine, especially if Jean Alesi is telling a few stories of the old days. 16 minutes gone in this session. Lewis Hamilton with the advantage so far by half a second from Max Verstappen. Soft tyres for Mercedes, medium tyres for Verstappen. Bottas is in third. And Lando Norris out on the track on the hard compound tyre.
Yeah, it's the first person I've seen running on the hard. Obviously, other people have, but it's actually nice getting some footage of someone on it to see how it fares.
Kimi, I think, was running the hard yesterday when he had his crash.
His whoopsie.
Yeah. It was a lovely line. Things Kimi Raikkonen is going to miss from Formula One, and someone put underneath it the apex, which I thought was a bit harsh. to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he is a world champion. He's all right.
Yeah. And we can see on our build-up to qualifying and to the race a bit more with Kimi Räikkönen, showing how he can hit the apex and a hovercraft, a lawnmower, and potentially a sand buggy as well. Looking forward to that one.
It's a very good film with Natalie and Martin out of the desert. It's well worth a watch.
Alonso continuing on his way. He's on the hard tyre too. Latifi goes 10th fastest for Williams. So far, Nikita Mazepin and Sebastian Vettel are the two that have had their lap times deleted. Vettel for going wide at that corner there, where Alonso keeps it nicely on the curb and within the white line, and is a second and a half down on the hard tyre when he crosses the line.
I love watching Fernando drive. I really do, and it's just fantastic. You know, pushing the car to the limit, and there's something about his driving style that just makes me smile. You just know he's having fun out there.
Well, the car always looks alive, doesn't it? It looks. He's got a very dynamic driving style. His inputs are all, you know, like he's dominating the car. He's hustling the car. He's just brilliant to watch.
Back, of course, here in Abu Dhabi. Last time we saw him driving here at the end of a race, he was doing donuts, wasn't he, with Hamilton and Vettel, and what should have been his 311th and final start, but he's come back again. Yuki Tsunoda going over the curve, and I noticed once more kicking up a load of paint there, and the paint getting dragged up. I think they were painting the curbs again last night. What I did notice as I was going on my track runners, it's Nikita Mazepin getting it out of shape at the chicane. What I did notice, there were lots of bits of paint that have been kind of sucked up from the curbs and then deposited back down on the track again.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing actually, because I asked the guys at the circuit about it, and they say it is the FIA spec paint. It's the same paint that they've used here for many years, but for some reason it's coming off. You know, whether it's the angle the cars are going, or the tires, or the downforce, whatever.
Hamilton going for another fast lap. He's done double cool down and continues on those soft compound tyres already with less fuel on board, of course. Now he's a 10th up through that first sector as Norris goes 9th fastest overall, and now Hamilton can just relax a little bit down that long back straight and pick up a decent tow from his teammate Valtteri Bottas, who was using DRS as well to help tow Lewis Hamilton even further towards the braking zone. 198 miles an hour in the speed trap. Hamilton did 205 miles an hour in the speed trap, given the tow behind Valtteri Bottas. So you would imagine this middle sector will be quite decent for Hamilton, especially yesterday as they were absolutely acing turn 9. The Mercedes looked really strong. 36.3 for the middle sector, fastest of all so far. And into the final sector we go then with Lewis Hamilton, fastest in the speed trap, quickest overall in sector 1 and sector 2. Ricciardo goes 10th fastest as Hamilton, pretty flat out now through the final couple of corners, is about to post a time that might take us into the 123s. He crosses the line. He's 0.05 of a second out of that. 124.05 for Hamilton.
Didn't even use all the circuit, second to last corner. he had that much speed, but no, very, very good lap. Definitely maximising those tyres in these temperatures. He's 1 second up on his teammate on the same tyre.
There's obviously a gain for him in terms of straight line speed. As you said, Crofty, 330 kilometers an hour. I was looking at Perez with the bigger wing, as Ted showed us earlier in the session. He was 323, which is...
The dash is loose, like you know how it clips into place. It won't stay clipped.
That's not ideal if he's got the dashboard moving around, but yeah, Perez 323 is actually quicker than I was expecting for the Red Bull with more downforce. So wonder if he's running a bit more engine mode. We'll see what Verstappen does. Last time round I looked, he was at 321, which is confusing because that makes him slower than Perez. So unless Honda and Red Bull are playing around with the engine modes, there's something odd going on there.
Playing around with engine modes, filling bags with sand at this time of the weekend, really?
Oh, it's a big lock-up for Charles there into turn 1 on the hard tyre.
We saw quite a few people locking up there yesterday, didn't we? We saw Kimi and Bottas and a couple of others as well.
Why would you be locking up going into that quite as much? It's not a place where we normally see
It's
huge amount of lockups.
No, I mean, if you look at him where he's braking there, he's turning in while he's braking at the same time as well. So the lockup actually came with steering input while he's running the brakes.
And the wind direction swirling around just a touch. It's not a strong wind necessarily out there, but it might be kind of a tailwind going into that particular turn. We're on board with Fernando Alonso while we watch the double world champion at work. Let's hear from Ted Kravitz.
Down at Alfa Romeo Sauber. Now, we all want Kimi to have a good final weekend, don't we, Crofty? It didn't really get off to the best start yesterday, where he made a bit of a mess, to put it lightly, at the back of his car. They've since repaired it, all the mechanics down here, but now he has an issue, it seems, on the power unit. The engine cover is off. The Ferrari guys are just checking and changing something on the left-hand side of the engine. They've also changed the cooling vents on either side of the halo. They're sort of small panels that you can take away and open them up if you need a bit more cooling for the power unit. So yeah, I'm sure they'll figure it out in time for qualifying, but another little headache for Kimi down here.
Kimi Raikkonen, who has raced so far in his career 57,454 miles, has completed 18,596 laps. And is the second oldest race winner in the last 40 years, behind Nigel Mansell, who was over 40, I think, when he won in Australia. Kimi won in the US just 4 days after his 39th birthday. Chance of a comeback still, Jensen Button.
Yeah, maybe a few years, too many years out of the sport, but yeah, Formula 1's come on quite a lot since 2017. I've only driven one race with these big cars, wide body cars.
Come on a lot since Australia 2001, when Kimi Raikkonen made his debut. What do you remember most about Kimi that weekend? I know it's a hard question because it's a long time away, but he overtook you.
Yeah, I was in a Benetton at the time. Wasn't the best of cars, but still, yeah, new boy coming in. I was a year into my career. I was experienced, and newbie Kimi Raikkonen overtook me at the Melbourne race, the Australian Grand Prix.
Yeah, it was. 23 races in single-seaters Kimi had done before progressing into Formula 1. And he had the audacity to overtake you at the race.
I had about the same, I think, in single-seaters, but yeah, he's a quick boy. He'll do okay one day, that guy, Kimi Raikkonen.
He'll go far,
yeah,
that Raikkonen.
So. Bottas done a very good lap, by the way. He's done... Well, he's gone faster than anyone.
He was.
Went a bit deep there.
That's the second time this weekend you've done that.
I know. At the same corner
At the same corner. Probably the same driver as well.
I think it's still up, though. I think I'll be interested to see. He didn't go as deep as he had on that previous occasion. Oh, big oversteer out of the last corner. It does go to the top of the time.
He definitely overheated those rears, didn't he? Turn 13, I think, on the entry. He's lost the rear. Oh, sorry, 12. Lost the rear a little bit, and I think you can just tell the overheating when he exited turn 16 there.
And is that pushing too hard too early on in the lap?
Most likely, and also the circuit temp's pretty high right now. With Lando Norris? Yeah, same with the rear. I'm sure it is to do with the wind as well, but all the cars seem a bit snappy out there.
Perez is on a good lap as well, by the way, guys. He's gone personal best in the middle sector. He's coming up, I can see on the driver tracker, to the last corner.
As is Lewis Hamilton, as we can see him on our screen. Perez has gone a little bit faster by just over a tenth to his previous best, 124.7. Hamilton with a 124.05. Valtteri Bottas a 124.02, separated by 300ths of a second.
Different tyre compound still, isn't it? Both Mercedes still on the soft, both Red Bulls still on the mediums, but because we're at the bottom end of the range of tyres, C4 and C5, the gain from the mediums to the soft is not as high as we're seeing in at other circuits.
Pirelli said 0.6 of a second. That was their overnight after yesterday.
That's not what a couple of the engineers were saying to me. They're sort of looking at 4 to 5. I know it's, it all depends on which car you're talking about as well. So Pirelli have to look at a generic number and average it, I suppose, across 10 teams, whereas the teams look at themselves.
Look at themselves. Let's look at Ted, or hear from Ted. Ted.
Crofty, I want to get all the really arcane stuff out of the way in FP3 before we start to concentrate on Verstappen and Hamilton. You know I love my arcane specialist detail. Heaven knows, Karun, you know I love it as well, as you love it.
Yes.
Sebastian Vettel is trying out a Schubert helmet. Sebastian Vettel, who has been Arai since the day he was born, well, all right, maybe not exactly the day he was born, but has been Arai helmet customer for every time, you know, as long as he's been in F1 and before, has just trying out in the garage a Schubert helmet. So, I mean, I'm bowled over by this. I am bowled over by this.
Why is he doing that then?
Well, he obviously wants to try it out, Crofty.
I know, but why change a winning habit?
I don't know. Maybe there's a commercial deal sometimes, yeah, in these things. You can have a commercial deal. Schubert is a German company, but that's never deterred Sebastian before. Sebastian has a small head. Just a statement of fact. His helmets, you know, have always fit well with the Arai ones. Arai tend to run a bit smaller. Certainly, if you have a bigger bonce, then you would tend to go with a bell, in my experience.
Or like Anthony Davidson with the
they all you can change the internals of the helmets, and also yeah. So like Felipe always had a smaller helmet than everyone else. He had a tiny helmet, crash helmet.
Because he is a very little man.
Yeah, but
so he's just a bit of arcane detail from down here.
I like
it's
it.
Fantastic,
Good
thank you.
Spot,
and very unusual to do an FP3. You'd think he would have waited until winter testing.
Is he going winter testing?
Well, he's going to, isn't he? He's going to drive the car before.
Well, yeah.
The new year.
Yeah, good point. But maybe you've got to do it now, because then there's going to be some design work going on with those helmets.
Very true.
That would need to be done before we get to Barcelona next year. We're on board with Lewis Hamilton, who's now going for another flying lap, and this is a proper flying lap, given the pace that he's showing.
Wow. I mean, 6/10 up in the first two sectors. The track, big snap of oversteer there under the bridge at 13, so that would have cost him a little bit of lap time, but I still think he's going to go comfortably to the top. It's a question of, you know, how much more could he have done without that snap at 13. Let's have a look. Wow, that is...
It's a 1:23.27. FP3 for Verstappen last year was a 1:36.2 fastest time.
He's 1.4 seconds quicker than the Red Bulls. Wow, that is impressive.
And even if Pirelli or your sources in the pit lane are right about the crossover between medium and soft, that's not going to make up all that difference. Albeit, fuel's burned down a little bit by now. They might have turned the engine mode up. I would imagine that is the Brazil engine that is in the back of that Mercedes as it stands.
Well, he's actually slower on the straight on that run, 3.24.
Yeah, without the toe.
Without the toe.
Tell you what, Ted, you should watch out. There'll be some massive sandbags outside the Mercedes pits when you walk past, I think.
Let's look at the start of this race on Sunday. Does Lewis Hamilton need to be on pole? If he's the one coming from behind in this winner-takes-all contest, I'll rephrase it. Does he need to be ahead of Max Verstappen at the start?
I don't think so. With the pace that that car has and what Lewis has, I don't think so. I really think this is going to be a two-stop race as well. So there's so many possibilities with strategy. The quicker car is probably going to win here. It's not going to be stuck behind. I think they can overtake. They have the straight line speed, so no. Even if he has a bad start, I think he can fight through if this pace is real.
In 2 out of the last 3 races, he's passed Max on track, hasn't he? So, yeah, I think the pace and straight line speed advantage that they have shown in the second half of the season makes actually pole position and qualifying. Of course, he wants to be on pole, but it makes it less critical to him winning the race and therefore the World Championship, I think.
It's a very good point. And you look at Mercedes' improvement in qualifying in the last kind of half a dozen races to show the turn of pace that they've had. This is corner analysis into turn 5, into the hairpin, where Hamilton goes in quite a bit faster, Jensen, and emerges a little bit faster.
Yeah, I mean, I think that every corner you're going to see that he's quicker than... that was with Bottas, correct?
Yes.
With Valtteri, yes. I mean, he's 7.5 tenths up the road. That's a lot of lap time. So he has definitely found the groove around here. Overnight change is working well. I know he has a new engine, but that's not 7.5 tenths.
When we say new engine, different engine to yesterday, fresher engine.
Yeah.
People think, new engine, Lewis Hamilton, 5-place grid penalty?
Yeah.
What? We missed that? No grid penalties as yet for anybody. Kimi Räikkönen 1.1 seconds off the pace as he heads into turn 9 on that soft compound tyre. I'd love to see Kimi Raikkonen in the points, finishing off as a point scorer in Formula One. I don't think anyone could see Kimi on the podium or winning this race, but you know, a decent, solid points finish for the man that's given us so much enjoyment over the years. That'd do nicely.
Yeah, it would. But the problem is going to be kind of overshadowed. A little bit, isn't it? I mean, it's like one of the biggest races in history this weekend. Poor guy, but I'm sure he doesn't mind.
I'll still save a bit of voice left for Kimi Raikkonen 6th. That would do very nicely indeed, if it happened.
I was going to say, I completely missed, by the way, Yuki Tsunoda on the hard tyre is 5th at the moment. That's another strong start to his day, isn't it? Like he was on very decent form yesterday, and that's another good little start to his day.
He's 2/10 off Max Verstappen on the medium.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a good lap.
What's going on here? Lots of work on the rear wing again at Red Bull. We've seen that a lot this season. I mean, Adrian Newey's actually gone into the back of the pit garage, looking on at the work going on the rear wing. Hamilton getting out of the car. Is that just for a comfort break? Or?
Potentially. It does happen during the course of these sessions, but it's certainly a chat with Pete Bonington, his engineer, just a very brief chat with Pete Bonington, his engineer. What I noticed from the Red Bull garage is that Paul Monaghan, Pedals, as he is called, was moving around, the chief engineer, quite smartly to try and sort something out as well. Ted, you're down at that Red Bull garage. What are they doing?
Well, it's Verstappen's rear wing again, and it's the I think you're seeing pictures of the DRS mechanism, the actuator in the middle of the. I know I've said it to you before. It's the N of Honda. Just looked for the N of Honda on the rear wing.
Yep.
And how many times have we seen this? 3, 4 this year. Adrian Newey, just as we look at it to the right-hand side of the rear wing, and Red Bull thought they had this fixed from Jeddah, from qualifying in Qatar, when they had to change it to a different rear wing they didn't really want to use, and therefore kind of, you know, knew that they were in trouble in Qatar, didn't they? Sort of handed the advantage to Mercedes.
There's a new wing going on, Ted.
There is, I know, I'm looking at it. So, is this just the DRS actuator being troublesome, or is this actually going to Checo's rear wing? I will know when I see the new one coming on, and you will see it as well. It's the same spec that Verstappen was running before. Okay, all right, so Verstappen wants to keep with the lower downforce rear wing, but one where the DRS actuator and potentially the oscillating and the flapping. Did we see any of the flapping with the DRS open? No, we didn't.
Not as yet.
No, we didn't. Okay, so maybe it's just troublesome and they can see it on the data and needs to be changed. But it's the same spec as Max was running for the beginning of this session.
Sorry if I'm throwing you a bit of a curveball, Ted,
Never.
but for those, this weekend is attracting a lot of attention from people who don't normally watch Formula One. So for those that are just joining us this season, what has been the issue with that Red Bull wing? What is the potential problem that they're trying to look at?
Right, so the drag reduction system, the DRS as we like to call it in Formula One, we do like engineers speak in this sport, sorry about that, new followers, but effectively they reduce drag by making the rear wing flap open, and of course that makes it kind of opening a letterbox. You can imagine air goes through it and drops some drag and gives the cars a straight line speed beast, and the car behind can then pass or have a better position to try and pass the one in front. It was a device thought up a few years ago to try and sort of, you know, improve racing, improve the show a bit. Some people like it, some people don't. But as they get sort of closer to the edge on technological detail and doing what they can, they make these bits lighter and more beneficial and everything. And in the past few races, Red Bull, when they've opened it, they've had this actuator. It's a little sort of hydraulic finger that comes up and opens the movable rear wing flap, and that's been misbehaving. It hasn't been as solid and strong as it should be, and it upsets the balance of the rear wing. They don't like it doing it. It's a bit of a problem, and they've been trying to fix it, and look, I thought they'd had it. They thought they'd had it under control from Saudi Arabia, where it was absolutely rock solid, but it looks like it's come back to trouble them again. Was that in simple enough terms for you, Crofton?
That was a monologue worthy of Mr. G. Butler at the back of the Red Bull garage. That was wonderful.
I didn't even say Sparta once.
Sparta. Simon must be there already with his autograph book.
He is on the hunt for a signature as I speak on that one. Now, that was fantastic, because we have talked about the Red Bull rear wing an awful lot, and it's worth putting it all into context, so thank you, Ted. Valtteri Bottas, meanwhile, is on a hot lap. 17.4 for the first sector, so not matching the best first sector time that we've seen so far.
No. Out on new boots. He's got new tyres on, as Lewis has, just leaving the box. So here he is into the brand new turn 9. Very exciting, long left-hander, banked. Very different from what we've had previously here. And the double right-hander, this is very tricky under braking. It's a tailwind today. A lot of people having issues with oversteer. Then the double left under the hotel. Nicely done. He had a little snap of oversteer there previously, but nice and smooth. And we've left him. Now we're looking at Lewis Hamilton on an out lap.
Oh, no.
That's a shame.
He was down.
Valtteri's not improved, has he? He's done a 24.809, so...
We sure it was new?
Well, according to the tyre graphic we've got in our in the commentary box, it is. Hamilton definitely was on new tyres. I saw him come out of the pits on shiny new tyres. So you'd assume they're running a similar program?
They might have put some fuel in to not show their hand too much.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out when Lewis starts his lap in about 3 corners time, won't we?
So our Mercedes over 1 lap, finding the pace they need, but are they overheating those rear tyres just a little bit as well? And will that be a significant factor in the race? Let's watch again as Hamilton powers his way down the main straight with the clock ticking.
Oh, he's off.
Oh dear, he's off already. It's been trickier that first turn this weekend than we've seen in the past. Whether they're arriving at it at a greater speed, I don't know.
Again there.
Another stuff of oversteer.
He's aborted the lap, hasn't he? He's had two moments. So, do we think, he's done, Jensen, obviously a very, very slow out lap. We saw him there weaving around. Do we think maybe the tyres weren't, despite the fact track temperature is 38 degrees?
And the pressures are higher.
Pressures are higher?
So yeah, very, very surprising. But if you look at their runs, it's amazing how quick they're going through the run. Obviously the fuel level's coming down, but tyres don't normally hold on that well.
Especially the softest tyre in the Pirelli range.
Yes.
A lot of understeer there, and that suggests to me the front tyres weren't ready. You know, the lack of front grip for him through that corner.
But then he had a snap of oversteer.
The next one.
Yeah, into turn 5. So.
As it stands then, 20 minutes to go in this session, and Hamilton 7/10 up on his teammate Valtteri Bottas. Perez and Verstappen are about 7/10 back on Bottas, 3rd and 4th as it stands. George Russell this weekend running for Williams for the 59th and final time. Average starting position for George, by the way. We talked a bit about average starting positions yesterday at Williams. 17.7 in 2019, 14.9 in 2020, and 12.8 in 2021. I just thought I'd throw that in the mix as it is a Saturday to show how, A, the Williams car has got a bit better, but how he has helped that progression and has produced some quite simply stunning performances in qualifying, including only being knocked out twice in Q1 this season.
He went through a period, didn't he, of being in Q3. I think it was 2 or 3 races in a row in Q3, and yeah, I know that they struggle with race pace more, and in traffic is the biggest issue. But when they're clear and he's able to get the maximum out of that car, it's working for him. You know, very impressive.
He's actually just ended up slightly behind Latifi, 300ths behind Latifi, so that's a good lap from Nicholas Latifi so far. I have to say, George's qualifying lap at Silverstone at the British Grand Prix, I thought was one of the laps of the season when he got himself into Q3. That was unbelievable, and the roar that came from the grandstands was very, very impressive. What he did on that lap there.
You know, we've all been asked for our moments of the season. We've concentrated on the races. That was one of my moments of the season, but you know, that was on qualifying on the Friday.
Yeah.
It was a brilliant atmosphere. Who's to say it won't be replicated next year when, of course, he'll be this man's teammates in the Mercedes and expected to get to Q3, as this man's teammate has done for every single one of the 100 races that they have been teammates at Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas teammates for a final time, their 100th and final time, and who's to say they won't celebrate that with a 81st front row lockout for Mercedes too.
There's something odd going on here, because Lewis, I think, went for another lap here. We're about to see it, and he's again aborted it. So what happened here?
Lock
5. Ooh, ran wide.
The rear's not with him, is it? No. Not able to get on the power. Oh, what's that coming out the back? Where the light is.
Rears are very hot.
I was just about to say, you know, rear's overheating. Oh, paint's coming up as well. Rear's overheating on that Mercedes. That's not good when you look at the longevity in the race.
Well, it doesn't make sense because on his lap 1 he had oversteer at turn 5, and that is not overheating. You can't get overheating that quickly.
And also, on his previous run, he didn't have overheating when he did the 23.2 lap time. So it's like he's got a. I wonder if this set of tires was pressured or set to a different target temperature, maybe, or there's something does change clearly. Something on this set of tires he's not happy with, because from the moment he's left the pits, it's not looked as comfortable as the previous set. He just went out and smashed it, didn't he? Just the lap time came so effortlessly for him.
Well, you would never go over the minimum tire pressure that you're given.
No.
You certainly wouldn't want to when the rear's at 21 PSI at the start with. That's very true. So Lewis Hamilton out on the track, going for a fast lap again, and the rear end just not sticking and getting away from him. And Mercedes struggling with overheating rears.
Rears are very hot.
As Hamilton relayed back to the pit lane. 16.5 minutes to go in this session. Hamilton fastest by 7.5 tenths. We can go down to the Red Bull pit wall though. Christian Horner is with us, just as Max Verstappen trying to get a bit of track space and to start a flying lap. He's behind the Ferrari, but not for long, Christian. How's the session gone so far? And tell us what the changes were to Max's rear wing. Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. So it's been a busy session because we've done a bit of high fuel running as well. This is Max now on the soft tire for the first time, just starting a fast lap, and it looks like he's got a clear bit of air ahead of him. So yeah, just working through a program and trying to get on with it.
What were the issues with the rear wing? Can you give us any more indication?
It was a reliability issue that we changed for, so yeah, we're just keeping a close eye on it. So yeah, one of those things, but an issue that we haven't seen previously.
Hey Christian, it's Jensen.
Hey Jensen.
Obviously it's a hot session. Is it representative, do you think, for qualifying? Can you still get a lot of useful information, the changes you've made, and moving forward to quali, you think you know where you'll be?
I think it's still useful. I mean, obviously, sorry, Max has just aborted a lap. Yeah, it's still useful. We're still learning. You're still, you know, making changes to the setup. So yeah, plenty going on.
Christian, it's Carlo. I was just looking at Checo's run on the medium. He looked like he had quite a good run for that. Presumably similar fuel loads on both cars, because his pace actually looked quite strong on the medium tyre.
Yeah, I think we're okay. You know, on the race run, I think the one lap you can see that lap of Lewis is pretty blistering. I mean, they turned the engine up for that, and they were 8 tenths up by the time they got to turn 6. So yeah, that's going to be hard to deal with this afternoon.
So that was going to be my follow-up. Obviously, you've got a different rear wing on the car.
Yeah, it just does a
Max.
turn
It looks like a lower downforce. Is that really targeted against this straight line speed advantage that Mercedes have had in the races recently?
Well, I think the only way we can compete with Mercedes is by running a lower wing. We've seen that pretty much all year. So that's why if you look at the Honda and Blazer rear wing, it's a fair bit smaller than our competitors. That's to try and get you know, straight line speed on this very power sensitive circuit that you've created.
Does that hurt you in the race though, Christian?
I don't think so. I think it's something that we've done, you know, throughout the season. So we've got experience with it. It's just a matter of how you tune your car and not having too much slip on either the front or rear axle.
Christian, thanks ever so much. Great to have you with us this weekend. We'll talk to you later in qualifying. As Christian mentioned, Max bailed out of that fast lap that he was on. We can hear the reason why now as he approached the chicane.
Yeah, it just does a turn in turn 6. It's unbelievable.
So Verstappen not very happy, and Lewis Hamilton and Nikita Mazepin. Do you remember?
Trying to get out of the way, but
Okay, copy.
Do you remember FP3 in Saudi a week ago? Well, Hamilton has just come out of the pits, and I think straight into the path of Nikita Mazepin. Here we go. It was on a flying lap. It's 2 cars, same bit of track, and for the second week in a row, Nikita Mazepin takes avoiding action to stop himself running into the back of the Mercedes.
Yeah, I mean, you should be told on the radio what's coming on track when you're coming out the pits, but I was also surprised how slow he was going out the pits there. He should have, you normally come onto the circuit at a relatively high speed so that you don't have that kind of incident, but
I mean, even here with the tight pit lane, going through the tunnel, it's not the easiest thing to get out of, is it?
no, it isn't. That's why you need the information from the team. But Lewis is on a flyer, purple first sector.
He's got the grip now. You just watch the run he had through the first sector, quickest of anyone, but it's not quite there. It does sound like his 23.2 lap was, obviously, Christy mentioned the engine was turned. Oh, he's locked up and gone straight on. So that will be the end of that lap. Turn 12.
There's a lot of mistakes out there, isn't there? I'm guessing that the higher pressures aren't helping. It's obviously hot. The wind's changed. So yeah, they're finding it very difficult to put a lap together.
I tell you, who's not finding it difficult to put a lap together. Yuki Tsunoda has gone 3rd fastest, only 1.1 seconds off the pace. That is now on the soft tyres for Yuki Tsunoda. Here comes Max Verstappen into the chicane, turn 6 and 7, where he didn't. So the car didn't want to turn in before. Looked a little better that time around.
He's down though, down 2/10 in the first sector compared to what we saw from Hamilton. The Ferraris have gone 5th and 6th. That makes Tsunoda's time even more impressive, ahead of both Sainz and Leclerc. Personal best for Max in the middle sector, but still, best part of 4/10 down. As you see the recharge light. That's interesting. He's got the recharge light flashing, recovering energy on his fast lap, which is not something you normally would see.
But it's on constantly, it seems.
Maybe a problem with the light.
Yeah.
Is he expecting rain? Surely not here. Verstappen to cross the line, and it does look to be on constantly. Goes 2nd fastest by 1/10 of a second to Lewis Hamilton. Did Red Bull turn up their engine slightly, given they say that Hamilton had his engine turned up for that 1:23.2?
Well, we said it wasn't a great lap, but that wasn't too bad.
I think it came to him, didn't he? I wonder if he was managing the tire temperatures in sector. It's always the case of this track. If you push too hard in sector 1, they overheat for sector 3. Max, I mentioned, was 2/10 down in sector 1. I wonder if that was a conscious decision not to overheat the tires, and therefore he could attack the final sector. But this is what practice is all about. The drivers want to get it into their own minds just how much you need to hold back. It will change, of course. The track temperature started off the session at 39, as we see a replay of Lewis going off at turn 12. The track temperature has dropped 2 degrees through the course of this session and will continue to drop another probably 6-7 degrees by the time we get to Q3.
You could hear the floor touching the ground there. Obviously running the car pretty low. Don't know if the pressures are low now because he's doing such slow out laps.
Decent lap for Ricciardo, by the way, splitting the Ferraris.
Yeah, I'm going to say the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo looking a little bit more competitive at the moment than it did yesterday. Here's his teammate Lando Norris is only 6/10 off through the first couple of sectors. Norris with a pole position during the course of this season. Can he get into the top 5? Maybe with that McLaren to end the season on a high this afternoon.
He's the only driver I've seen, by the way, on the entry to turn 9 that's using that bit of curb. And Crofty, you would have seen him while running around yesterday. It's not actually a smooth surface.
No,
it's got a jagged edge, so you can see the sparks. I think most drivers seem to think it'll upset the balance, but not Lando, and he's used it to good effect. That's a good lap time there, because he's now, what, 6/10 ahead of Daniel?
Yeah.
That's a strong lap.
Yeah, so if Ricciardo was competitive, that's a super lap then from Lando Norris. McLaren into the top 4 with Tsunoda and Perez 5th and 6th. Zach Brown, who was playing golf on Wednesday with Lando, admiring Lando's driving of a different kind here in Marina this afternoon.
Did you see the picture of Zach's orange trousers when he's playing golf?
I saw Zach up close. I didn't need a picture. to see the papaya trousers that were being worn.
I can't get it out of my mind. Those trousers were special.
It's not something you're going to unsee,
No,
is it?
Can't unsee that.
You know,
it's a shame.
He stood out on the golf course, it has to be said. For many reasons. In fact, his golf was probably better than mine. I was fading by that stage. 2 games of golf in 2 days.
I heard yesterday that you were an extremely zen golfer. That's how you were being described by.
Absolute zen, mate. I'm at one with the course and explore all parts of it. Here's Sergio Perez exploring the racing line only so far as he gets down to what I now like. I think turn 12 is a special little corner now that you have to approach with a bit more caution than in the past.
He sounded like he locked the rears a little bit into turn 12. Bit of oversteer on the entry, or a bit wide of the apex. I think that's because of the oversteer though.
Yeah.
Lost a bit of time in that final sector too.
It's like he's had the opposite approach to Verstappen has, hasn't he? He's attacked the first part of the lap and then it's gone away from him. I mean, his sector 3 time is slower than what he did on mediums with high fuel, which tells you something.
Low fuel run for Lance Stroll as he goes 10th fastest. We can head down to Ted.
At Mercedes, where it's starting to build a little bit of tension. The fuel line goes onto Lewis Hamilton's car just to take a little bit of fuel out as we prepare for qualifying. Valtteri Bottas comes into the pits and goes roll back into the box, thinking about where all the time is lost. Well, I can tell him it's the middle sector, but why is Bottas so much slower than Hamilton at the moment? Lots of drivers being told out there on the track just to cool off their tyres. Maybe it's that. Bottas gets the fuel pumped out of his car as well. There might be some fuel in that as well, but they're just building up to it. They're winding themselves up down here. It's pretty calm, I must say. They haven't had to change rear wings down here at Mercedes, have they, Crofty? So, well, let's see. I'll compare it to Red Bull in a little bit. But yeah, let's see what Bottas has got coming into this session, because maybe with that different wing on Perez's car than Bottas, the number 2s could play more of a game in qualifying.
Top 7 all on the soft tyre for their low fuel runs. Their best time so far. Sainz, Ricciardo, Leclerc on the mediums could very much explain the difference between Norris and Ricciardo in the same car. One on the softs, one on the mediums. Alonso and Ocon still on the medium tyre, but Max Verstappen here, Jenson Button on the soft tyre as he powers down the straights.
Yeah, he's a few laps into his tyre run now, but they seem to be holding on really well. He's actually done a green first sector, his best first sector of the day. Up through the second sector, this is the second long straight, even though it's not really a straight. DRS zone coming into the beautiful turn 9. Long left-hander, thank you, Karim.
Oh,
with a big
like
snap.
It, though, did he?
Look, he improved.
He's
first 2 sectors, didn't he?
We didn't like it halfway around the banking. The tyres were like, no, I've had enough.
Well, it's just they're not getting them working on the first lap, which is surprising. It puts a lot of pressure on them going into qualifying, you know, because you don't want to be doing it on lap 2 and lap 3 in qualifying. So it definitely puts pressure on them to get that balance sorted.
It's really confusing, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should have gone back to the other tyre. I got a flat spot on this one. I thought you knew. I don't think I can drive with this tyre.
You can see his hands actually vibrating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just at a cruising speed down that back straight.
He obviously didn't say anything, but expected them to see the lockup on the screen.
They've got time to do a sort of hot pit stop, don't they? If they wanted to. There's Ron Meadows, the man who will make the call for that hot pit stop if they want to do it. Hamilton coming underneath the hotel now. Let's see if he does come into the pits.
I wonder if this is Max Verstappen's last bit of action in anger as such from this session. I would imagine he will be back out at the end for practice starts on the grid, but we'll see this off board.
That's the classic tyre overheating, isn't it? Going in, and there's a point where it just says, nah, we're done.
Yeah.
At least he's found some front end in the car. Max doesn't like understeer, and once he gets a pointy car, that's his strength. So he's found the limit now, so I'm sure he'll find a setup for him.
Pierre Gasly, currently 6th fastest, pulling into the pits. Who's out there trying to improve? Sebastian Vettel just set a personal best in the final sector, but only 15th fastest as Gasly runs through the pits. Esteban Ocon, who is still on those medium tyres, is putting in some personal best sectors for sector 1 and 2. Looking at his teammate Fernando Alonso, this has been better lap so far by Ocon in terms of the comparison by about 0.2 of a second, as we can watch Hamilton along the back straight. Did he come into the pits? Did they do a hot change? Is he staying out on those tyres?
Yes, he did. He came in the box, 43-second first sector, and it's an out lap.
So there you go, hot stop.
We can't help it. Hot pit stop here, 26 degrees.
Well, yes.
The air temperature. It'll cool down a bit for qualifying, but with 2 minutes and 40 seconds to go, Karun's a bit confused. Jensen still thinks it's a nailed-on two-stopper for this race, but if Mercedes are having trouble with their rear tyres, I think Red Bull might have joined them a little bit in that as well. Issues for both of the contenders going into the final qualifying session.
Checo's on a lap at the moment, and at the moment he's behind both AlphaTauri cars, so he's done a personal best in the middle sector. We're watching Hamilton start what will probably be his final timed lap of this session. I can tell you Perez is coming up with the last couple of corners now, so we'll keep an eye on how his lap unfolds as Lewis charges down the hill towards turn 5, and we get the first sector time.
Perez goes 4th. Hamilton way off during the first sector.
Yeah. Verstappen, he's going to come out to do his practice start, as Crofty mentioned before. So because of the unusual pit lane here, of course, it's the only pit lane that runs through a tunnel underneath the racetrack, so you can't actually do the practice starts at the end of it. So that for those of you who haven't seen a practice session here before, they'll do it on the grid at the end.
I ran through the tunnel last night. I'm still amazed that no one's crashed into it during the race.
It's tight, isn't it?
It's very tight.
And it's very slippery down there as well, because it's cold.
And quite steep coming up as well, but maybe not the Formula 1 car.
Yeah, but no, it is actually perfect for the teams here. They get to do 3 practice starts on track.
Well, normally, yes, but Kimi wiped one of those away yesterday.
He did.
When he had the red flag. Car performance scores on the straight. Verstappen still ranking first and a 10th ahead of Lewis Hamilton on the straight with that low downforce rear wing. But it's kind of the upper end of downforce of the low downforce configuration.
I take that with I mean, I'm sure it's the scores which are correct for this session. I don't doubt that. But we have to factor in that the engines haven't been turned up for qualifying. So let's wait to see what happens when they do turn the engines up. What's happening here?
Someone was just...
What the f was that?
Right.
I don't know.
The mechanism dropped, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
What happened to the days with a human being holding a lollipop?
Well, he used to get it wrong occasionally, so that's why they went for the mechanism. And the mechanism goes wrong occasionally as well. What happened there?
Well, he's going very slowly in the hard tyres, and I imagine he's just got no temperature or grip.
I remember...
hang on a minute. Oh, that's Verstappen just pulling out of the way. I'm going to say he saw the Ferrari coming through of Carlos Sainz, to be honest, on a flying lap, and then just pulled over to one side. Just for a moment, I'm thinking, why is Verstappen pulling off the track?
I remember we had lollipop men.
Your lollipop man at Honda was a top lad.
He was, Alistair, and he basically held the car, tried to hold the car back with the lollipop. He lifted it so I could go, and then realised there was a car coming, put it down, and he's against my helmet, and he's trying to hold me back. Didn't work, but nice try.
He's a big chap as well.
He's a big chap.
He had some force. Some force. So look, we're on board with Verstappen. The checkered flag is now out. First driver to take the checkered flag was Pierre Gasly. This is not going to count for any time lap for Verstappen. He's just getting back to the grid for a practice start. So FP1, Lewis Hamilton was the fastest. Sorry, Max Verstappen was the fastest. FP2, Lewis Hamilton was the fastest. They've only split FP1 and FP2 between them once this season. That was the Austrian Grand Prix. Verstappen won from pole there and extended his championship lead, if you remember, to 32 points, the biggest gap between the two drivers at any stage this season. Well, Hamilton has followed up from his FP2 lead to lead here in FP3. So Mercedes have been quickest both in the representative conditions and in the higher track temperatures. But Are we in the consensus that they are struggling a bit more with their rear tyres in terms of overheating, it seems, than Red Bull? Or are Red Bull struggling just as much?
Yeah, I think they are struggling just as much. I think it's just tricky to get the tyre to last for the entire lap, and it's just down to your respective approaches. But ultimately, if we have to look across the last 3 practice sessions, I would still say Mercedes seem to be in better shape.
Yeah, it seemed very difficult for them to actually get a lap on lap 1 as well. So that could be the higher pressures, very high circuit temperature, and just finding it difficult to find the balance.
It's also the first FP3 session that Lewis Hamilton has led since Hungary. Seems a long, long time ago now.
So, looking at the long run yesterday, I would say that Max is looking at starting on the soft tyre in the race.
You reckon?
I reckon in Q2, normally the top guys will run the medium in Q2 because they can easily get through to Q3 and qualify. And that tyre is what they start the race on. I know you know this, Crofty, but just some people might not. But I actually have a feeling he's going to go for the soft, so he's got that start performance. You don't agree?
No. I think it's a fascinating possibility that Verstappen and Hamilton could be on different tyre compounds come the start of this race. Mercedes have traditionally, they favoured the medium tyre. What I do think, I'd add to you there, JB, I think that Bottas and Perez might be on a contrary strategy to whatever Verstappen and Hamilton are on, so that both teams can try and play the team game to work an advantage for the one driver who can win a world championship.
I think it's a soft tyre 100% will give Max an advantage off the line if they do that. But just looking at how quickly they overheated, and I know the track temp is higher now, I think he'd struggle to hang on to it after the sort of first 5-6 laps, don't you think?
However, how important is track position at this track?
Huge.
I know you've made it better, but is track position still king here?
I think it is still important. Obviously, if you have a massive pace advantage, which Mercedes could possibly have, they'll still be overtaking. But there's a 2-stop race. I think it's pretty interesting starting on the soft tyre.
It's aggressive.
It is aggressive, but
it's a way to go, and it may be, if one's on the soft and one's on the medium, it might sort out any potential first corner shenanigans, unless the driver behind is on the soft and the driver in front is on the medium, and then anything can happen.
Listen, if you don't have a fast...
Max, super Max, super Max, super Max, super Max, super Max. Ik mis geen race, heb scheid aan mijn centen. Ik zie Max zijn mooiste momenten. Hij is de king van Barcelona. Rijdt alles zoek van Spa tot Monza. De geur van rubber en smeltend asfalt. Ik juich als Max weer één voorbij knalt. Zijn inhaalacties zijn bijzonder. Het is een baas, een wereldwonder. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1.
Bizar! Fucking bizar! Jaren zit je naar dingen te kijken en te hopen. En daar is hij. Max Verstappen in de laatste bocht in Barcelona. Yo hey! Yo ho!
Max. Zodra je Max ziet racen op de baan, dan denk je yes. Hij is niet te passeren, niemand krijgt het cadeau. Hij is een pure racer, vangt ze op en roept no.
Hij is de nieuwe baas.
Hij is de nieuwe baas.
Max is de nieuwe baas.
Hij is de nieuwe baas.
Ja, wij gaan helemaal los.
Hij is de nieuwe bos. Supermax, Supermax, ik ben apetrots. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1. Yo fucking ho, niet meer normaal. Hij is een held en gaat maximaal. Fucking bizar, een fenomeen. Hij gaat naar de top, Max is de nummer 1.
Yo, fucking hell, wat bizar. Ongelooflijk. Sportoverwinningen zijn zo mooi. En deze is de allermooiste die ik in mijn leven gezien heb. Jongen, jongen, jongen.
Max, 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 super Max,